Steve Monnington. Steve has been involved in the exhibition sector for 22 years. He first joined the Blenheim Group as Director of International Development, handling all of the acquisitions that took Blenheim from a small UK company to the world's largest exhibition organizer. In 1996, Steve set up his own company, Mayfield Media Strategies, providing M&A brokering services and strategic business development consultancy to exhibition organizers. Steve.
Barry, and thank you to Mr. Park and to the AKEI for inviting me here. Are we all still awake? I think so. Excuse me, are we all still awake? Yeah. Thank you. Okay, now I'd just like to understand the demographics of the people we have in the audience. So, by a show of hands, please, everybody here who has come from a venue, please raise their hands. Okay. Everybody who is a private organizer, please show their hands. Okay. From an association and from a service provider. And from those people who now realize that they're in the wrong room and have got nothing to do with exhibitions. 3. Not bad. It's less than usual. Okay. So, selling your exhibition business. I won't bother to go through this because Barry did a very good job on his introduction of me, except to say that increasingly, as M&A specialists for this sector, we have been concentrating on working with local entrepreneurs in emerging markets to develop partnerships with international organizers. Now, you may ask why this presentation about selling your business is on a program about innovation and creativity. Well, the answer is very simple. The South Korean exhibition industry over the next 5 years will internationalize, and I believe it will be the single biggest change that your industry will see in that period of time. Based on what we've seen in other markets in the Middle East, in Brazil, in other parts of Asia, now in Turkey. This isn't just a matter of if it will happen, but it's a matter of when it will happen and how quickly it will happen. And I'll make a prediction now that in 5 years' time, if we're sitting here and I'm lucky enough to be invited to the forum, we will actually have at least 5 international organizers who are active in this market, and that your landscape of exhibitions will have changed fundamentally. You will have brands, international brands that have been replicated into the market, and you will have increasing numbers of international exhibitors and international visitors, and all of the things that come with internationalization as partners come into the market. So, I'm going to talk about the state of the global acquisition market, what has happened, and why this is going to affect South Korea in the near future. I'm going to talk about how the international organizers approach new markets, what they look for in assessing new markets. I'm going to look at the sorts of companies that they look at acquiring or partnering with. And this is as relevant to the exhibition arms of the venues as it is to the private organizers. I'm then going to look at how you might take advantage of that and how you might look at preparing your business for sale. And we'll touch on how the acquisition process works. We'll also look, most importantly, at how companies maximize the price that they get for their exhibitions. And we'll look at a few reasons why these projects succeed or fail. So let's just start now with looking at what happened to mergers and acquisitions when the crisis hit. We expected, when the economic crisis came, that everything would just stop. People would stop spending money. And to some extent, that's what happened. People stopped spending big money. People stopped borrowing. People stopped raising money on the stock market. And the big deals disappeared overnight. But what actually happened was that the international companies who had their exhibitions in mature markets, where GDP growth was flat or even negative, had to find ways to grow their businesses still. So what they did was they started to look at new markets that had a higher GDP growth in order to maintain their overall growth. It's quite interesting that 2 years ago, when the big exhibition companies were posting their results, and people like Reed were showing 25% decreases in revenue, and Informa Group were showing 20% decreases in revenue, UBM showed flat revenue. But if you actually looked at it, it was a 20% drop in mature markets, and it was a 20% growth in Asia in particular, which compensated and actually allowed them to maintain their business. So we saw, unexpectedly, a lot of money that was available for small, strategic, internally financed deals. And everybody talks about the BRIC countries, and these were the areas that people focused on: Brazil, Russia, India, and China. But some of these countries have got their own challenges. For example, Russia, the economy has been very bad. It's now improved, and ITE Group are the company that took advantage of that market. They now went into the market when it was the right time, and they have a stranglehold on that market. They're now the #1 organizer. That's put off other people in going there. India has been difficult. India should be as big a market as China, or approaching, but it isn't. The Indian organizers have very, very high price expectations, and that's scared off a lot of the international organizers. Brazil has been the hottest market recently. Brazil has attracted an enormous number of international organizers, and it's kind of overheated. People are paying very high prices. There are 7 or 8 organizers after every deal that happens, and as prices increase, the smaller organizers think that they can achieve the same price for their business, and I think that Brazil is overheating right now. So we actually have some new hot markets. Turkey, where the internationalization of the market is probably about halfway through now. We're very active in that market. We've introduced 5 international organizers into the market in the last 2 or 3 years, and we expect a few more. And I expect the Turkish market to be more or less fully internationalized by the end of 2012. We talked to all of the major internationals about their strategy. They want to know that when we're looking at markets, when we're talking to local organizers, when we're representing businesses that are for sale, that we understand that they may well be the logical buyers. So we talked to all the British-based companies, we talked to the Germans, the French, the Italians, the Americans, and what we're hearing from everybody, Turkey we know about, we're hearing about Indonesia, and we're hearing about Mexico. So Effie, you better get your members prepared, because the internationals are coming, I guarantee it. Mexico and other parts of Latin America will be the next market. And then the stage after that, and I mean, when I talk about the future, I talk about the near future, in the next 2 to 3 years. What are the markets everybody is talking about? They're talking about South Korea. They're talking about the rest of Latin America, places like Argentina and Chile, and they're talking about Africa. And this comes back to what Nat was saying. Africa also has all of the attributes that are attracting companies for investment. So, looking at each of these countries, what is the assessment that they make when they want to go into a new market? Well, they want to know that there's enough quality venue space that's available. And this is one of the reasons why India has not grown as quickly as it should, because India suffers from a chronic lack of good exhibition space. And as long as that continues, the Indian market will not realize its potential. I was interested last night when we had our short presentation from Exco to hear that there's now 260,000 square meters of exhibition space in Korea, and good purpose-built, new, functional exhibition space. And that's the key point, the key starting point. So Korea ticks that box. There has to be a demand for international products. There also has to be a number of independently owned organisers, because it's very hard and very long and very time-consuming for an international organiser to come into a market, to create an office, to create an infrastructure, and just start launching shows. It takes years. And also, they will suffer from a lack of cultural awareness, a lack of political and business contacts, and therefore the quickest way into a market is to partner with a local organiser. And therefore, if there are independently owned organisers in the market who have market-leading events, and no one's interested in secondary or tertiary events, they should be market-leading events, then that is a key point. And the shows that exist in the market must have some international participation already. They must show that they are capable of attracting the international community, but there must be potential for a lot more, so that when the international organiser comes in, one of the ways that they can add value is to use their network to bring in the international community and add to the show's international profile. So once they've made that assessment as to the right markets to go to, how do they actually approach those markets? Well, as I said, they want security when they go into a new market, and therefore it's almost always partnership first. It's very foolish of somebody to come in and think that they can teach the local market how to do things. It's very foolish and very arrogant, and people who try to do that generally fail. So it's a partnership first. The importance of the local partner is that the local partner has the business and cultural know-how, they have the key relationships, and they can give that organizer, the international organizer, a good head start. They tend to want to buy into the business. They tend to want to have a decent majority stake. But there is no point in buying 95% of a company and expecting the partner to be happy and motivated with 5%. Normally, in our experience, people are buying between 60 and 75% of a business, which will leave between 25 and 40% for the local organizer, which is a real incentive for future growth as you work together as a partnership. Quite often, the first move will be a strategic one. So, for example, in Turkey, we sold the market-leading jewelry shows to UBM, UBM Asia. UBM Asia run the largest jewelry fair in the world, which is Hong Kong. They wanted to get into the Turkish market. They wanted a business that they understood, where they could add value while they learnt the market. And so we did that deal with them. What they will then do is to broaden that out by tying up with a more traditional organizer with a broader portfolio, so that they can then use that as a base to launch their own brands into the market. So what they're looking for, or companies who actually own a sector, this is going to give high barriers to competition. And as I said, they're going to feel safer if they've got existing knowledge and understand the strategy of that sector and can add value. And as importantly, they're looking for their local partner to add value to their business. Now, South Korea, is one of the only countries at the moment where outbound sales are increasing. If you look at most of the markets, the government are reducing subsidies. They're reducing the number of shows where they give special deals to. But South Korea and Turkey actually share one thing, which is that the exhibitors want to go abroad. And the international organisers can add value to your business, but also they look to your business to add value to theirs as well by taking pavilions of exhibitors out to their shows. As I said, they'll be looking for companies who have a broader portfolio, because going back to the jewelry show in Turkey, the lady who owned that business came from the jewelry sector. She doesn't know anything else. She can't launch a food show or a machinery show or an IT show. She's from the sector. So people now look for more rounded exhibition organisers who can run shows in whatever sectors they want, so that when there is a gap in the market, they can launch a show together in that sector. We talked about the market-leading position, and as importantly, an internationally minded management. The business will change when an international organizer gets involved. An internationally minded management will help innovation and will understand the levels of sophistication that they're trying to bring in. They will understand how to leverage international trade. And also, beneath the owner, we need a talented management structure, preferably English-speaking, because quite often, when somebody invests in a business, the owner who's been running it for 10 or 15 or 20 years and receives some money, he still wants to be involved, but he wants to maybe slow down a little bit, take a secondary position. And it's important that the business doesn't just rely on them, that there is a team of people beneath him who can actually carry on to innovate the business and can communicate with their international partner. The business also needs to have what I call clean financials. In a lot of emerging markets, there is a problem with on-book and off-book revenue and costs in an attempt to try to reduce tax liabilities. And one of the biggest challenges of the international companies, who are generally public companies quoted on the stock exchange, is that they have to try to get their head around this. This is not something that they can do, and it's not something that they necessarily understand. So they look for businesses that have got what we call clean, honest financials. And beyond this, there's probably one other thing which I didn't put on this chart, and it's a kind of indefinable quality. Honesty, integrity, open to change. Not anything that you can spot from within the business, but just the feeling of security that you're working with an honest partner. All of the international organizers have had bad experiences at some time or another. They don't make it common knowledge, but they have all suffered at the hands of dishonest local partners in one country or another. And therefore they place great emphasis on the qualities, those types of qualities of the partner. Okay, so South Korea is the place, and you are the company who the international organizer wants to talk to. How do you prepare your company for sale? Well, first of all, purchasers are buying the future. They're interested in the past. They can only look at the past, but the past to them is not particularly relevant. They're buying the future, and therefore the only information they've got to go on is the last probably 3 years financial information and commercial information. So at some stage, particularly the private organizers in this room, you will be approached by one or more international company who wants to come into the market. And you should start thinking now about how you run your business for when that day comes. You need to put all the correct procedures in place. You need that 3 years of information to look good, to look consistent. That was helpful. To look good and to look consistent. And you need to demonstrate that the business is well run, both commercially and financially, so that when they do come along and they do what we call their due diligence, and I'll explain what that is in a minute, that actually everything stacks up. And that's something you can start now, even if you're not even thinking of selling your business. That's something you can start now, because at some stage you will probably be tempted to do so. And there is no point in thinking, oh my God, I should have done that 2 or 3 years ago. So all the things I'm going to talk about now, I really strongly recommend that you actually take this away and start doing it when you get back to your offices tomorrow or Monday. I'll give you a couple of extra days, Monday. So let's talk about logical company structures. There's no point in receiving lots of money, millions of dollars, from an international organizer and then giving it to the tax man. No point at all. You're the guys who've done all the hard work. Why should the tax man get the money? So tax planning is key. Set up your business or restructure your business now as if you're going to sell it. Get it right from day one. If there are parts of the business that you're not going to sell, for example, we've had businesses with houses, farms, boats, helicopters, all sorts of things in the company. Make sure that they're not there. Make sure that they're in the right place. If you have a business where you have a totally unrelated business that you're not going to sell to an exhibition organizer, put it in a separate company and do it now, so that what you actually have is a business that somebody can buy when the time comes. And if you take all the tax advice that you need, then you can just sell when the day comes and make sure that you minimize the tax or even pay no tax at all, depending on the rules of your tax regime. The quality of budgeting and forecasting is a key consideration for the international organizers when they're looking at your business. I don't mean what your forecast is for next year, but what your forecast was for last year and whether you achieved it or not. Because when they look at your business and they look at your expectations, if you are always wildly optimistic, if you're always forecasting a doubling of profits and never achieving it, they won't believe the targets that you're setting for the future. So make sure that, that you put in place proper budgeting and forecasting tools, and make sure that you achieve, or at least nearly achieve, or you exceed your forecasts, because what they're looking for are people who understand their business, understanding how it will work, and actually achieving the growth targets that they set themselves. Contracted sales and the patterns of contracted sales. In other words, how much re-sign you have when your contracted sales come in on a year-on-year basis is a very, very good way of tracking how well the company is doing when you compare these graphs year on year. We always tell our clients to start producing graphs, weekly graphs. It's very simple. You take your contracted sales revenue total and you plot it week by week. It's actually a very good internal management tool because you can see, are you behind the same time last year? Are you ahead of last year? Are you far enough ahead from last year to achieve the targets you've set for this year? And if you don't do this yourself as part of the due diligence, the purchaser will do it and they will look at it and they will interpret it. So make it easy, run your business like that. Make sure that you have long-term agreements where it counts. So if you need association support for your show, make sure that you've tied them in. And therefore that there is no risk that they're going to go and support a competitive show. On the other side, and I'm sorry if I upset any venue owners here, but don't sign long-term uneconomic deals with venues. I've seen many deals where the price has been reduced because there is a long-term venue deal. And if you think about it, an international organizer may have a show in another venue. They may want to buy your business and they may want to co-locate the two shows. And if you have a 3-year contract, which is going to cost a lot of money to get out of, then as a penalty, then that's going to reduce the value of your business. So sign the venue deals for the years that you need them and no more. So that's what I mean about long-term agreements where it counts. Make sure you've got the right support. Make sure that you don't have the burden. Also make sure that you have good financial data, including key performance indicators. So we always tell people to run statistics such as the yield per square meter, not the headline rates, but what you're actually achieving per square meter. The exhibitor retention rates, what percentage of exhibitors are rebooking year on year. The rebooking rates at the show for the following year. The visitor promotion cost per visitor. How effectively are you spending your marketing budgets? How much is it actually costing you to get every visitor through the door? All of this creates a great impression, and first impressions are the most important when you're talking to an international organizer who wants to work with you. A quick run through the acquisition process, which starts with an information memorandum. We see a lot of people who engage with international organizers who just send an email about sales, they send another email about profit, they send an email about the shows, and it's impossible for the for the potential partner to really understand what's going on in the business. So we always recommend that people prepare an information memorandum. It's about quality, not quantity. For a small-sized business with 3 or 4 shows, that would be 7 or 8 pages in maximum. It would provide enough information to make a proper assessment and to make an accurate valuation. And when I talk about honesty, this is not a marketing document. Whenever our clients give us the text for an information memorandum, we take out all of the words like superb and the best and fantastic because they're just too subjective. It should be about the good things and the bad things about your business, because if there are bad things, then they will be found in due diligence. And what we're trying to do here is to avoid renegotiation. The information memorandum should provide the right information to make a valuation. The due diligence that they do afterwards should be to confirm the information in the information memorandum, not find all the surprises and all the bad things. Because as soon as somebody sees bad stuff and they renegotiate, it destroys the relationship between the two parties. Again, you may well be approached by somebody, but it's also, if you're selling your business, it's about identifying the potential acquirers. And again, it's quality, not quantity. If you go to 45 companies in the exhibition industry with your business, then you devalue your business. You should be limiting the number of people that you talk to. You should know why each one would want to buy your business, and you should limit it simply to logical, strategic buyers, because as we will see in a minute, that is one of the key things that will affect the valuation of your business. You need to make sure that you sign a confidentiality agreement with them so that they don't misuse your information. And I can't stress enough the importance of a formal sale process. Normally, the first thing that happens is you get approached by somebody. And you're flattered. It's great. Somebody's really interested in my company. And you'll spend 6 months talking to them, and then they'll make you an offer, maybe, and it's not what you want. So you go away and you say no. And then somebody else approaches you, and you spend 6 months talking to them. And so it goes on and on and on. Meanwhile, you have to run your business, and this type of thing is very diverting. If you actually run a formal sale process with a number of potential buyers, you're saying 2 things. You're saying this is a competitive situation, and therefore I'm looking for a combination of the best partner and the best offer. And you're also reducing the amount of time that you're spending on this, because you're going to set a timetable. You have everybody in discussion at the same time, and it will create some competitive price tension. If you talk to one company, they know that if they make an offer for your business, if you say no, they can come back and they can say, well, all right, I'll give you a little bit more. And as a result of that, they will always start on the low side because they know they can come back. If they know there are 3 other interested parties in your business and they make a low offer, they know that actually they're not going to get the business at all. It's going to go to somebody else. So it focuses the mind, and it will always result in higher offers for the business. Having got that, before you get the price, they will always ask you about price guidance. They will all say to you, what would you like for your business? What do you think it's worth? There's only one reason why they do that, and that's so that they don't overpay. And it's actually a crazy argument, because if you have a figure which is higher than they're prepared to pay, they will simply say, I'm sorry, that's too high. If you say a figure which is lower than they expect, they'll probably still say it's too high, but inwardly they'll be laughing and thinking, fantastic, I've just saved some money. So we never, ever, ever give price guidance. We give them all the information, we let them draw their conclusions, and then we negotiate. And if you use an intermediary, then you're not involved in that emotional exchange. Because if your buyer sits across the table from you, they'll read your body language. They will see when you sweat, when you smile, when you shake, when they've got to the right price. If you use an intermediary who's dispassionate, then actually they can't read it. And the other thing is that it allows you to have a secondary negotiation. If you use an intermediary who gets to a particular stage, then your intermediary says, but of course I now have to go and check with my client. And when the intermediary talks to you, you can discuss the tactics. You have a little bit more time. So we always recommend that you remove yourself from the negotiations. And a good intermediary will always work with you to understand what you're trying to achieve, and will never lock you into anything that you don't want. But it's a very good technique to use to get the price up. The other way of getting the price up is, particularly if you have confidence in the growth of the business, is not just to accept a sum of money now, but to accept also some money based on the performance of the following year. If you're going to do that, then you better be in a partnership where you're still controlling the business, you're still controlling the revenue. But we find that the single most effective way of increasing the amount of money you get is to use an earn-out deferred consideration based on the growth of the next year or the year after. And when we come to my case study towards the end of this presentation, you'll see how effective that negotiation was in that case. Once you've agreed the price, they will do commercial, financial, and legal due diligence. Commercial due diligence may well include exhibitor and visitor interviews. You really, as part of your planning process, need to be sure that you've got customer service. This goes right back to what Barry was saying about training the exhibitors, giving the exhibitors what they want. If your exhibitors love you, then that will come through in the due diligence. And if your visitors in the community, you work well with them, that will come through in the due diligence. And that is probably the single biggest factor that will give a purchaser comfort, the fact that your community speaks positively about you and what you're doing. For due diligence, you must present, basically, that's commercial due diligence. Financial due diligence more or less amounts to an audit of your financial, financial accounts. And the legal due diligence is there really to make sure that you actually own what you say that you own and that there is nothing that is going to affect that in the future. So you need to prepare comprehensive, you need to prepare the information well, and you need to present the information for due diligence well. Purchaser will get a good feeling if the information they ask for is provided quickly, and they will get a bad feeling if it takes weeks to get it, and each time they get a piece of information, it just raises a question somewhere else. And the good feeling is what you're looking for. It helps the process go smoothly. Lawyers can mess up a deal big time because they don't understand the commercial aspects, they only understand the legal aspects, and when the lawyers start talking to the lawyers, that's where it goes off track, because they will try to represent you, they'll try to defend your position, but often they will go way, way beyond where they should and lose sight of the commercial reality. So you need to control your lawyers. And you need to be prepared to give warranties in your business. Warranties are statements that your business, that you own your business, that it's well run, that there's no litigation, all of these things that the purchaser will depend on. Moving along. How are we doing for time? Okay. Let's just talk a little bit about the principles of valuation. What gives value to a business? Well, first of all, the size of the business, critical mass. The business must make a difference to the purchaser's business. It must add something tangible. Otherwise, it's just a management headache. So people look for businesses with a decent critical mass. Talking about the portfolio, exhibitions are valued higher than publishing. Publishing is on the decline. If you have publishing, think about putting it in a different company and just selling your exhibitions, because exhibitions do attract a much higher valuation. Historic growth trends, we talked about the 3 years information, dips in performance, raise questions. If you have a business that is growing steadily in all areas, then you will get a higher value for your business. And also it must have continuing growth potential. Not just the financial forecast, but the rationale. Where is the growth going to come from? The purchaser must understand where that growth is. And the most important part of the information memorandum is not the history, but it's identifying where the growth will be. And the strategic fit with the purchaser's business. The more added value, the higher the price, which is why I say don't talk to 45 companies, talk to the people for whom the acquisition would be strategic. Different sectors attract different higher prices. The two sectors that are hot at the moment and are attracting the highest prices are energy and anything relating to eco, green, sustainability, recycling, waste management. All of those areas are the businesses that people want to get into and are prepared to pay the prices for. The percentage of the business you're selling will also affect the price. Whether you're selling 49%, nobody actually really wants to buy 49% these days. They'll see it as an investment. They won't pay a particularly big price for that. But if they're buying 51 or 60 or 70, then they will offer a higher price. And if you're exiting completely and selling 100%, then actually you want an even higher price because they will take advantage of all of the growth. Who the purchaser is key. We get usually 4 or 5 offers for the businesses that we sell. And for that same business, for that same information, the highest offer is usually at least double the lowest offer. That's how big the range is. And it depends on the purchaser as much as their view of the shows and how strategic they are. People offer higher prices if they feel they can add value, but some companies just offer higher prices than others. Current valuation range, people always talk to me about this. It depends on so many things, but today we're seeing current valuation ranges which are expressed as a multiple of earnings before interest and tax of between 5 and 7. Actually, I'm going to amend that to 5 and 8 because we've done a couple of good deals recently. People often expect to have a 10 times multiple of their profits. Generally, you're dreaming if that's what you want for your business. Anything less than 5 means that they don't really value it at all. So somewhere within that range. To maximize the selling price, create great events that the organizers want to buy. Sell at the right time. This is absolutely crucial. It's really hard for an entrepreneur to sell their business while it's still growing because they can see the next stage, they can see the next stage. But at some stage, the next stage will be flattening, and then at some stage, the next stage will be a decline. And at that stage, nobody wants to buy it. If you're getting these multiples of profit for your business, you have to leave growth in for the purchaser. As I said before, run a process to get competitive tension. The negotiation must be tough but fair because particularly if you're selling a stake in the business, you're going to have to work together and the deal has to be right for both parties. Purchasers will not overpay. They will pay a good price up to a point and then they will walk away. And think about a 2-step process. Part now, 60, 70%. Part later, in 3 or 4 years' time, with all of the growth that comes in between from working together with your partner. Just wanted to do a quick case study of a show in the UK. We sold a business called Counter-Terrorism Expo. This was launched by a small independent organizer. He was actually in the gym one day. He was on the treadmill. He was looking at the TV screen, and he saw another bombing. And he's a very entrepreneurial guy, and he was thinking, counter-terrorism expo. Got off the treadmill, had a shower, went to his office, launched the show. He saw that this was going to be explosive growth. He couldn't do it on his own, so he asked us to invite potential buyers to the first event. Now, this is highly unusual. Normally, you will sell an event after 3 or 4 editions, so you have a history. We analysed the market, we found the strategic buyers, we invited them to the show, and they all wanted to buy it. And we sold 60% of the business 2 months after the first show took place to a company called Clarion Events, who run some of the big defence shows around the world. We sold 60% based on an earn-out, so as I said before, deferred consideration based on growth. We sold the next 20% last year, and the final 20% will be sold after the next show. Our client retained the management control throughout. The show has had high growth. From a business that made £40,000 profit in year one, the total acquisition price will be in excess of £8 million. £8 million. And the purchaser is really happy to pay that money because they have got a fantastic show that they wouldn't have got otherwise. They can take it to the next stage. And of course, our client, from being on his treadmill, is extremely happy. So that kind of brings together all of the things that I was talking about into one case study. So you can see by using all of those techniques, you can actually achieve quite a phenomenal position. Not all deals are like that. Deals can go wrong. If you prepare, so I mean, these are some examples where deals have gone wrong. The misleading information memorandum. Due diligence will find the problems that the purchaser wasn't aware of when he made his offer. It will lead to either pulling out or it will lead to renegotiation, and often that's the end of the deal. Inadequate key agreements, for example, as we talked about, long-term venue contracts, uneconomic, short-term association contracts, management contracts for events that has a break clause in a year's time. All of these things can lead to people pulling out. The fact that ultimately it's seen that you don't own your IPR. We sold an event in the UK, or we tried to sell an event in the UK, and a week before it went through, Apple trademarked the name of the show. And the purchaser hadn't actually gone through in his due diligence the trademark stuff he should have done. They went through it at the last minute. In their checklist, they found that Apple had trademarked the name of the show. They pulled out. End of deal. Other areas where deals go wrong, where purchasers pull out, is if the seller is not prepared to sign a non-compete agreement. That is a clear indication that as soon as you've sold the business, you're going to go and launch a show against the show that you've just sold. Normally, people ask for 2 or 3 year non-compete agreements. You should always be prepared to give it. If you don't, it sends a bad signal. It makes the purchaser nervous. They will pull out on that basis. Negative feedback from exhibitors. We talked about engaging with your community and getting good feedback from your community. If the commercial due diligence that the purchaser does shows that you don't understand your community or your community doesn't like you, then that doesn't really bode well for the future of the show. And finally, if you try to renegotiate the deal at the last minute, the purchaser will walk away. There was a show in the UK recently where the purchaser waited until the day of signing. They asked for £2 million more. They thought that the purchaser, who's a big organizer, would pay it because they'd gone for 6 months doing all of the work, paying all of the fees. Out of principle, they walked away. The deal didn't get done. So those are the reasons why deals go wrong, but it's a minority. And if you follow the steps here, then you should have success. And in particular, be prepared for the international organizers to come and think about everything that I've said so that you can have a long and happy, successful partnership with them as they come here. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Question?
Steve, thank you very much. I think it was a very, very interesting and really in-depth speech. Actually, I didn't expect to get so much insight from him, you know. Two questions. As a private organizer, let's say you just identified Korea as a future market. We are looking in all over Asia. Would you consider minority stakes for a private organizer if we're going into a country like Korea or if anywhere else?
No, I wouldn't, because I think it's important. I mean, most of the international organisers want a majority stake. That doesn't mean that they want to control the business, but it's partly accounting, because you want to be able to account for the profit on your books, whereas if you have a minority stake, it's often treated as an investment. But it's also the fact that if you want to have control, if something goes wrong, you can have control. The worst thing is to have a minority stake, for things to go wrong, and not actually be able to do anything about it. So if you have the majority stake, we always, on behalf of our clients, we always negotiate minority protections so that the majority stakeholder can't manipulate the business to reduce the value to the local partner. But at the same time, there will be cases where things happen and they need to be able to take control. And so for that reason, people like to go for majority stakes. Some German messers will go for 50-50s. Most other people won't, because often that creates a totally different relationship, and that can just lead to deadlock.
Thank you. And the second question would be, you were talking about emerging and near future growth. How do you see in Asia, particularly Singapore and Hong Kong, with their shows, developments, you know, towards, because we know they're doing pretty well, and then, you know, we have to fight here in Korea or in Indonesia, you know. How do you see the competitive landscape here?
I think Singapore's slightly different because Singapore sees itself as the hub for the ASEAN region, and therefore I think the future depends on their ability to continue to get people from those regions, while those regions themselves are becoming stronger and having more focused shows. So, for example, you know, if you look at Indonesia, I haven't done the statistics, but I would imagine that in some of these countries like Indonesia, the number of people coming from Indonesia to the shows in Singapore is probably decreasing. So I think that Singapore, which isn't a large market and depends on other markets, is actually going to have more of a problem. And also, now that Hong Kong and China are almost synonymous, then the same thing holds true, I think. So I think those two markets, it's probably the future is less clear than it is for the other countries.
We have time for one more. Does anybody else? Oh, sure.
It's Speaker's Corner today.
I became aware of a very large media company that is investing a great deal of money into their digital assets. And I was curious to get your input on what you think the future is for including digital assets into the valuation of the sale of a company.
I think at the moment it's non-existent, and that is because nobody's making money out of the digital parts of the business. If you listen to David Levin at UBM, who is an evangelist when it comes to the digital side and all of the online events, he doesn't call them virtual exhibitions. That's banned within UBM. He calls them online events. The amount of money that they make from their business from online events, with all of their resources, is tiny compared to the investment. And smaller organisers haven't even started. I think that quite rightly, the buyer believes that the expertise, the growth in profits that they can bring as a result of their expertise are things they shouldn't pay for. And therefore, the fact that it doesn't happen, but it could happen, isn't something they're going to put in their valuation, because only they can bring it. Otherwise, the local organiser that they're buying would have done it already. We're not seeing, 98% of the revenue of every business that we sell comes from the exhibition side, whether it be sponsorship or exhibit sales or whatever. and it just doesn't figure at all in people's valuations.
Good. Thank you, Steve. Thank you. So, the 8th annual, I just dropped something. The 8th annual Korean Exhibition Forum is now drawing to a close. It's been a very, very exciting day. I know people often say if you learn one good thing during the course of the day was worthwhile. I learned 6. So I would just like to share with you what I learned just from our highly qualified panel of speakers today. One of the things I learned was in order to strive for happiness, it's well to have it ourselves, but also to be able to share that with all the people that we come in contact with, and if we do, we all win. I learned that big exhibitions like CL still work with trial and error, and sometimes they make mistakes, and what the message I got was they're not afraid to make mistakes. Mistakes are okay. That's all the learning process. I learned that the world is changing to a younger demographic, and this younger demographic are our exhibitors, there are attendees, which means business cannot just continue on as normal. It has to change because the perspectives of these various demographics are different. And if we keep talking to the same person over and over and over again, the opportunities we miss are huge. I've learned that the center of the exhibition gravity is shifting very quickly to Asia. I've also learned that, and when I spoke to you this morning, I talked about 2 pillars. I talked about organizers and I talked about exhibitors. Neglectfully, I missed another pillar, which I learned, which I now want to add to that, which are the suppliers. So when we talk about partnerships, then it's now a 3-way partnerships where if all of us are trying to accomplish the same thing, which is what I think we are, then it becomes win-win-win. A few years ago, I attended a conference in Sao Paulo, Brazil, where, this was probably 5 or 6 years ago, where the speaker predicted that Brazil's exhibition industry was in the process of being nationalized. Just as you heard Steve talk today, that South Korea is in that exact same position. So if what Steve is suggesting is correct, and I have absolutely no reason to doubt his predictions, South Korea sits on the cusp of a wave that we all get to ride. Today is going to give us the tools that I think we need in order to ride that wave. It's all about innovation. It's all about the ideas and the methodologies and the interactions that we've gotten from each other during the course of this fabulous day that are going to allow us to move forward as South Korea takes what's the prediction? Number 2 position, perhaps, in Asia, as being the number 2 most important area in the exhibition business. And if we want to be there, then it's all about what today I hope has started for you. And without innovation, we perish. It just is, it's a necessity of life. So as I turn the microphone back to our chairman, just on a very personal note, this is my very first trip to Korea. My wife and I came here a week ago. We wanted to take advantage of your wonderful country. We have toured around. We have seen many things. We have developed a sense for South Koreans, and we're coming back. I mean, we absolutely fell in love with your country and in love with your people. So I thank you for your hospitality. I thank you for your gentleness. I thank you for your respect. And I thank you so much for inviting me to this conference. Thank you so much.